At what point do you think money stops bringing you happiness?
Maybe like 100?
I guess like 150.
200K?
200,000.
Probably 300,000
300,000.
in San Francisco.
70K.
I make like 75 right now, and I have everything I want, but I want to be able to buy a house at least. Everything past that is just material, right?
So if you're like me, we've all been told that we need to make at least $75,000 a year to be happy. Beyond that, happiness plateaus. That's based on this 2010 study from two researchers at Princeton, Angus Deaton and Daniel Kahneman. They concluded that emotional well-being rises with income, but there is no further progress beyond an annual income of $75,000. And for the most part, everyone seemed to just nod their head and agree with the study, considering that 47.7% of households in America, or 58.95 million households, have an income of more than $75,000 per year. It resonated with a lot of people. This narrative created some complacency among some of my friends who made less than $75,000 a year. Now, what was the point? If you made more than 75K, it's not like you were gonna be any happier, so why even try? Now, get this, new research has actually just been conducted that refutes the original study from 2010. And who's the researcher behind this new information? It's none other than Daniel Kahneman. That's the original psychologist from the 2010 study. So the same people that told us that happiness plateaus at $75,000 a year are now telling us that they were wrong. So where did they go wrong? What led to this discovery? And also, how much money do you need to be making in order to be happy? First, we need to understand the actual criteria of the first study in the first place to understand how this all works. So back in 2010, Angus Deaton and psychologist Daniel Kahneman, they ran a survey of 1,000 people in America, and they actually got over 450,000 responses that basically said that you did not report any greater amount of happiness if you made more than 75K a year. And according to them, there were actually two types of happiness. The first is your day-to-day mood or your experienced well-being. That's if you're feeling stressed or sad or happy that day, or maybe you're having a case of the Mondays.
Ugh, I hate Mondays.
And then there's the other type of happiness, which is satisfaction. That comes down to how you're living your life and if you find yourself living a fulfilling life. So which one of these types of happiness did the $75,000 a year mark actually affect? Well, back 13 years ago, we weren't all addicted to our smartphones yet. We weren't cracked out like we are today. And so this survey was actually conducted by plain old telephone.
Soon after you dial the number you want, you will hear the ringing signal.
That's right, not even an annoying email survey. This team actually picked up the phone, talked to real people on the other end of the phone, and got survey data from them. The team would ask the participants about their previous day, and it was assessed based on a series of yes or no questions. Questions like the following. Did you experience the feeling of enjoyment during a lot of the day yesterday? Yes or no. Did you experience the feeling of stress during a lot of the day yesterday? Yes or no. How about laughter, gratitude, or awe? And finally, did you ever experience the feeling of embarrassment after you said bye to someone, but then you actually walked in the same direction? Life evaluation was then assessed based on a ladder system, starting from the bottom of the ladder, which was rated a 0, all the way to the top of the ladder, which is rated a 10. The top of the ladder would represent the best possible life for the participant, and the bottom of the ladder would represent the worst possible life. They were then asked, quote, on which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? Participants would respond and the researchers would record their answers, but now I'm just sitting here wondering, why not just ask them how they're doing on a scale of 0 to 10? What's up with the ladder? What they discovered was a curve that looked like the following. So you can see that positive feelings kept increasing at a linear rate until the participants made around $70,000 a year, at which point it starts to level off and there was no discernible result from someone making a lot more. Whether people had experienced the feelings of stress, enjoyment, smiling, anger, or worry, money didn't really matter after $75,000. Now, stress-free feelings were felt as long as basic needs were met, which came out to around $45,000 a year. Quote, more money does not necessarily buy more happiness, but less money is associated with emotional pain. And this makes sense to me. If you can't cover your housing, your food, your transportation, maybe your Spotify subscription, what's the fun in that? Life is pretty hard at that point. At the same time, they observed that more money had virtually no effect on how someone felt about their satisfaction with their life. It seems that fulfillment then still comes from within, and there are still some intangibles associated with it. Now, this study was so revolutionary at that time, and it was definitely covered in the media a lot, it basically turned the status quo on its head. This study was so influential that people were actually changing their actions and their behavior around it. So this guy named Dan Price, he actually gave everyone in his company Gravity Payments a minimum salary of $70,000 a year.
Every employee at the small credit card payments company will be scaled up to a minimum annual salary of $70,000 $30,000.
Now, there is a problem with this study, however. It simply wasn't accurate. I'm sure if you've clicked on this video, you've probably already come around to that conclusion, but even before I made this video, I sat around and thought, what was the amount of money that I needed to be happy? The answer is so variable, and even on the survey that I ran on this community channel, the results and the comments were all over the place. The majority of people thought they needed to make $125,000 a year or more, and in second place was between 80 and 125K. The 75K a year figure, well, it came in fourth just after the just show me the results result. Now, the comments were even more mixed. I mean, Mr. James Bond here was making 90 to 100K, living in a high cost of living area, and he feels like he's just barely getting by. Versus there were others that thought that they only needed around $30,000 a year to be happy. I didn't know times were so tough for 007 these days, so thoughts and prayers to him. So fast forward to today, and we have the study that actually refutes the study from 2010 by researcher Daniel Kahneman. It is important to note that Angus Deaton wanted to be left out of this new study. This study is filled with scientific language, but I've done my best to interpret the findings and translate them for you in terms that we can all understand. What was the reason for Daniel's reanalysis of his original study? It turns out that there was a researcher by the name of Matthew Killingsworth that came out with his own research from 2 years earlier, saying that the original study was conducted with a flawed method. I mean, they literally just called people and asked them how they felt the following day, and that original survey, since it was taken with day-old data, it relied on what's called remembered feelings. So that's exactly how you felt the day before and not actually how you felt in the moment. Now, think of it like type 2 fun. That's basically the type of fun where you are having a miserable time going through the experience. So think of a really, really tough hike.
This is so hard.
I can't do this, Mom.
Come on, keep pushing, kids. We're almost there.
But then once you get to the top, you get this feeling of accomplishment.
Isn't it amazing, Brian?
You all of a sudden feel like the hike was a good one, especially when you're recounting it to your friends over the dinner table the following day. Killingsworth's point was that you should probably get real-time data from how people are feeling in the exact moment about their income instead of what's called remembered feelings, because the way that we remember something isn't always exactly the same as we feel it. And what do you know, it's been 10 years since that study, and Killingsworth was able to use smartphones, which everybody has attached to them 24/7, and basically figure out in a real-time basis how people were feeling. By collecting real-time reports of experienced well-being, aka happiness, Killingsworth was able to then examine the true relationship between household income and happiness in the United States. Now, Killingsworth's method was better in a few areas. Number one, it was measured in real time. Number two, it was measured on a continuous scale. Number three, it measured dozens of separate occasions instead of just a single phone call. And number four, it included a lot more granular income increments. So the previous study just topped out at 120K per year, and this study went all the way up to 500,000 and more. Participants would have their smartphone basically pinged at random times throughout the day, asking them a series of questions. It included questions like, how do you feel right now? How satisfied do you feel with your life? And what is your total annual household income? In this way, he was able to triangulate the exact point where happiness started to drop off with income. So what were the results of this glorious study? Well, quote, larger incomes were robustly associated with both greater experience well-being, how we feel, and greater evaluative well-being, our life satisfaction. There was no observed plateau in experienced well-being, as you can see by this graph. As you made more income, your experienced well-being just continued to go up and up and up. So let me repeat that. The more you made, the seemingly more you were happy, no matter what. Life satisfaction also seemed to rise in line with higher income. The result was so conclusive that Daniel Kahneman, the original researcher from 2010, simply accepted the conclusion about the linear relationship between average happiness and income. But how much happier were these people? Can we quantify it somehow? It's not enough to just say, hey, yeah, these guys were happier, but how much happier were they? What the researchers did was try to quantify it based on the happiness levels of the participants. The study found that there was actually an unhappy minority, so about 20% of the participants were basically more money no matter what wouldn't change their happiness level at all. So no matter how much more money the unhappiest 20% made, it wouldn't make them any happier. And that's probably why you hear that old adage that money doesn't buy you happiness, because for a select 20% or fewer, it actually doesn't. On the flip side, there is a group termed the happiest 30%, and those feelings of well-being actually sharply accelerated once they earned over $100,000 per year. That means if you're already pretty happy happy, money is just gonna augment that happiness. But if you're already sad and unhappy, it's not like money's gonna do anything different. For example, if you love someone and if you've been in a long-term relationship and that person breaks up with you all of a sudden, no amount of money can make you instantly feel better. Also, if you're unhappy due to a problem that can't be solved with money, let's say you're really sick, then all you really want to be is better, and money's not going to do anything for you. A Confucius saying that I like is that, quote, "A sick man only wants one thing. A healthy man wants 10,000 things. When you're sick, all you want to do is be better. If you're physically unwell, you don't even have the desire for other things." So the main gist of this study was that 90% of the people had less than $200,000 per year in income, but they did have some participants that went all the way up to 500K per year or more. And they actually found that more money equated to more happiness. Was there a new plateau that they were able to find? In fact, no, not really, because what actually was their problem was that they didn't have enough data points of people making over $500,000 a year. Without more data points of people making over $500,000 per year, it was really hard to triangulate an exact income level where happiness started to drop off. The pattern exists for incomes up to $500,000 per year, but where is the actual stopping place? That's an interesting question. So I believe that money buys you freedom and it also buys you time. And so by having a good salary, you can solve a lot of minor inconveniences with your life. Perhaps you live with a spouse and you guys always argue about doing the laundry. Well, all of a sudden, if you had more of a disposable income, you could just get a wash and fold service and then you guys would never argue about the laundry ever again. I think we all know that there are rich people out there that are pretty miserable as well. I think that's a well-known fact. So it's understood that you just can't buy your way to happiness. I don't think happiness is a binary state either, where it's like either you're happy or you're not. I think that happiness can live on a scale. So for me at least, I think perspective and gratitude are a lot when it comes to happiness. Oftentimes we're unhappy with the things that we have. So our car might be too old, our wardrobe might be too out of style, and maybe our job isn't paying us enough. But if you put that all into perspective, it's like, hey, at least we have a car, at least we have clothes and a house, and at least we have a job. So if you're watching this YouTube video from the comfort of a home, then perhaps things aren't that bad. So I think our society really tends to lend itself to overconsumption and trying to upgrade our lives. But sometimes I think simply existing is just enough. I've personally found more happiness just meditating, being present, and simply enjoying the process of creating these videos for you guys. As far as where income tops out and happiness tops out, I don't really know what the answer to that is. I know that for some point in my life, I did make $75,000 a year, and it seems like my problems these days, even though I make more money, are exactly the same. So maybe for me, it was $75,000 a year to be happy, but these days, maybe it's closer to 100K with inflation, as well as the cost of living area that I live in. I live in San Francisco. Let me know in the comments how much you guys need to be happy. I appreciate you guys watching this for so long, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.